Hey everybody, my name is Joe Murphy. I'm a lawyer here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My office is called the J. Murphy Firm. Telephone number there is 412-521-2000. Some of you may have seen my videos about immigration law. I'm going to talk about something a little different today, and the topic is a pretty important one, and one that a lot of people run into, unfortunately, and that topic is DUI pullovers and how to handle them. Everybody wants to know. They always ask me, "Oh, Joe, what would I do? What should I do if I get pulled over in a DUI?" Today I'm going to talk to you about how to protect yourself in a DUI pullover. Now look, you're not supposed to be drinking and driving. It's very dangerous, not just to you, but to other people. I can't stress it enough. It's not worth it. We're in a modern world. We have Uber, public transit, Lyft, a million other options. Where you can, take advantage of those. But God forbid you find yourself in a situation where you're pulled over. Maybe you've had a drink, maybe you've had too many, or it could be something else too, marijuana, for example. And we're going to talk about that today. So let's get into it. All right, well, the first thing that's going to happen is you're going to have to break some provision of the Motor Vehicle Code. That could be drifting through a stop sign, speeding, or it could be something simple as an expired registration, emission stickers. It depends on where you're at. In this live, I'm going to be talking about the Pennsylvania law of DUI, but some of this is valuable in any state. But for the most part, this is going to be a Pennsylvania DUI related talk. So again, as I was saying, there'd have to be probable cause, some violation of the Motor Vehicle Code. And the examples I gave are a stop sign, maybe you didn't complete stop, a turning signal, a light out, any of those simple, rather mundane things that you wouldn't expect would result in a pullover and certainly wouldn't expect to result in a DUI is the basic way that most of these get started, and that's the probable cause. The officer witnesses a violation of the Motor Vehicle Code, turns on their light, and you pull over. At a certain point, you're going to stop the car. The officer's going to come to your window and ask for your license, registration, and proof of financial responsibility. For the vast majority of us, proof of financial responsibility means your insurance card. And this is where the shenanigans immediately start. You're going to be, so to speak, and I'm going to put you from the perspective of the officer, you're going to be reaching in the dark, and he's going to keep asking you questions. Where are you coming from? This is the first assessment of your ability to handle the condition you're in. Almost certainly, the minute you rolled the window down, the police knew that there had been alcohol used. They could smell it, marijuana, things of that nature. So what they're doing now is asking or testing your ability to handle multiple complicated and stressful things at the same time. They're asking you questions, and you're trying to find these documents in the dark while you're scared. My advice to you would be not to try and do both things at the same time. And I'll give you an example. If you're fumbling in the dark for your license and registration like this, and the officer's asking you questions, you might stop and answer the question and wait for the questions to stop before you start again. I believe that if you did this once or twice, they might stop this little game of trying to get you to deal with police questioning while intoxicated and while scared all at the same time. But that's how it starts. So that's the first of what I think of 7 parts to a DUI stop and arrest. And I'm going to go over the parts right now, and then I'm going to go in detail into each part. So the first part is the probable cause. That is a violation of the Motor Vehicle Code observed by the police officer that results in a stop, and then during the stop they smell alcohol, marijuana, or some other reason, come into suspicion that it's more going on than just the basic Motor Vehicle Code violation that they've witnessed. And then we were talking about the initial interaction, and that's where they have the split attention, where you're trying to find your documents in the dark and they keep asking questions. And again, my advice during that phase of the interaction is to not do both. If they start asking questions, stop fumbling. And when they stop asking questions, then you could start looking for your documents. At a certain point, and this is where it really gets hairy, you're going to be questioned about drug or alcohol use. By then, the officer's probably assessed that you're intoxicated in one way or another, and they'll ask the question, you had anything to drink or smoke today, something like that. Now, a lot of people at this point, they're pretty aware that they smell like booze, that they've been drinking, and they guess that the officer probably knows too. And a lot of people, they don't want to admit to drinking and get themselves in trouble, but they don't want to lie to law enforcement. And they try and tell this little white lie, and they say, well, I had a beer after work, officer. This never works. Okay, for starters, you're answering a question the police officer didn't ask. You're talking about quantity. He's asking about whether. They don't care how much. They want that admission that you used any. And that starts forming the foundation to elevate this traffic stop into arresting you, taking you to the hospital, forcing you to a blood draw, or whatever else they're doing that day. So this little white lie, it's a waste of time. If you've been, I wouldn't answer any questions at all, and that's my general advice, and it'll be a theme throughout this video. And you don't have to be a hard case. You don't have to be one of these sovereign citizens or anything. I would just look the officer right in the eye and respectfully say, with respect, officer, I'm not going to answer any questions about that sort of stuff. This will likely result in feigned outrage, perhaps even feigned anger on the part of the police officer. I mean, he needs that admission. He wants that admission very badly. It's very nice for him to have it later in court that you admitted you'd been drinking, and therefore it was reasonable for him to arrest you, to take you to the hospital, to make you do a blood test or whatever else they're doing. And if you're denying them that, they don't like it. And they may play a lot of games about that. Is there some reason why, sir? You know, this kind of, just with respect, officer, I'm not answering those questions. And this is kind of interesting. If you would look at the infamous Tiger Woods, the last DUI he got, that was his problem. If he had refused to answer questions, he would not have had a DUI. Here, these things aren't going to prevent you from getting a DUI. They're not going to prevent you from getting arrested. They may not prevent you from having to take a plea or even being convicted. But these tips I'm giving you are designed to increase your chances. And that's the biggest thing you can do. Refuse to answer questions. Do it respectfully. Do it gently. You don't need to do it out of anger. But you do need to refuse, and you do need to not give these questions. After that, if you're going to refuse to answer questions, the officer's going to want to try and get you into field sobriety testing. That's the silly stuff, right? The Macarena, walk, turn, touch your nose, do the hokey pokey, turn yourself about. None of this stuff is required. None of it. So you're going to refuse that too. Okay, I'm not doing those tests, officer. And again, you may have to go through the feigned anger, the outrage. We've all been trained to be good little boys and girls here. No one talks their way out of it anymore. There may have been, there's this urban legend, somebody sometime, some year, someplace in the past talked themselves out of it. It's not happening anymore. The minute those questions about drug and alcohol use start being asked, you're almost certainly going to be arrested. It's what you do in between that first question and the arrest that may give someone like me a chance to get you a break or a not guilty later. So not answering questions, not doing field sobriety tests. Same thing for those stupid portable breathalyzers. They're not required either. Most of them are uncalibrated. They can be dirty, and you should refuse to do those. Now, again, we've all been trained to be respectful of law enforcement, and I certainly agree that you should be respectful of law enforcement. They have an important job. But this is about your rights. You're not doing anything extra illegal, okay? You're not going to get in extra trouble. They're not going to do something nasty to you. By the time, as I said, they ask you these questions, they are. Okay, that is, they are going to do something nasty. It means they are going to arrest you. The question, again, is how much probable cause they had to do that. So now you refuse to answer questions, so to speak. You refuse to let them write down in their little book of notes, he admitted using alcohol. You've refused to do the silly little test, which, by the way, is not required. They can arrest you. In addition to the feigned outrage and the appeal to your natural desire to be respectful of law enforcement, you may get threatened. They'd like to say, sir, I need to remind you, or ma'am, I need to remind you that if you refuse to do the tests required by law, your license will face an additional suspension. That's true, okay, but those aren't the required tests. The required test, the test that you can get in trouble for refusing, is a post-arrest chemical test of your blood or breath. So you haven't been arrested yet. You don't have to do any of these. And none of them are chemical tests anyway. The little funny little dance on the side of the highway, hold your leg in the air, it's not a chemical test. Neither is asking you questions. So you can refuse any of these. They're not required by our motor vehicle code, and they're not the sort of testing you can get in trouble for refusing. So that's another little trick law enforcement does, and I hate to call it trick. I mean, they've got a job, and their job is to arrest and punish as many drunk drivers as possible to suppress this very dangerous activity. I'm not encouraging anyone to do that. I'm strongly discouraging it. It's just a terrible situation. A DUI is the least of your worries. Can you imagine the guilt you'd feel if you hurt somebody? But my point here is to protect yourself if you're in this situation. So now, again, back to the thing. You've refused to incriminate yourself. You've refused to do this stupid little dance, and you've refused to do the portable breathalyzer. They're going to be arrested and put in the back of a police car. Police officers tend to be quite aggressive once they do that, and while they're doing it, and with good reason. They want to get you in cuffs and in custody before your fight or flight response kicks in and they have to fight with you. So you'll get in the car and then you'll be driving probably to wherever they're doing blood testing, usually the local hospital. They may have a blood tech that they have at the hospital, or they may even have a blood testing technician at their barracks. So you're in the back of the car, you're riding along, and now there's a come down. Your fear of being arrested is now over because you have been arrested. And this is really dangerous because the inside of those cars are recorded. And a lot of people start making admissions. Oh, yeah, I probably had one too many. Keep your mouth shut. Everything's being recorded and can be used against you until you're released from police custody. You may think you haven't been read your Miranda rights, so you can talk all you want. That's not true. Miranda only applies to post-arrest, that's custodial interrogation. You'll notice when you get in that police car, the police don't ask you any questions at all. But they're very aware that people start babbling when they're put in the back of the car. Don't fall for this trap. Keep your mouth shut. Ride to the hospital. My advice is that when you get there to do the test. That's the test you require. Now you've been arrested, and now they want to do a chemical test of your breath or urine. That's required by the law. If you fail to do that, if you refuse to, you can refuse, but it's a separate crime. You could theoretically be convicted of both refusing and DUI if they wanted to push the case. But you do have to do that post-arrest chemical test. All right, so why? Why is this important now? I mean, why would I give this advice out? Some people have accused me of being reckless giving out advice of this type. The law has changed. If you look on my blog, that's on the J. Murphy Firm website, jmurphyfirm.com. There's a blog. There's an article called The Perverse Evolution of DUI Law. There are people getting DUIs who aren't intoxicated, who will be intoxicated in the future, who aren't driving. The law has been drastically changed, and all sorts of strange outcomes are happening. I had a client, quite recently, as a matter of fact, who went out to dinner, had a couple drinks near his house, probably more than he should have had, made an assessment of himself. He felt great. On his way home, rolled through a stop sign. There's your probable cause. Police pulled him over, smelled the booze, asked him to submit. These guys did have a portable breathalyzer. Asked him to submit to the portable breathalyzer. And again, I guess he hadn't seen this video. I hadn't made it yet. He cooperated with that. He blew into the portable breathalyzer, and he was under the legal limit. And the police officer made him wait. While he's waiting, the alcohol is leaching back out of the meal in his stomach and into his system. And the alcohol, the BAC, was climbing. And ultimately, about an hour and 15 minutes after the pullover, he had to sit there for an hour and 15 minutes. The officer asked him for another blow. He blew again, and it was over the number, and he was given a DUI. So this is the sort of nonsense that's going on. It's really not the law you'd expect it to be. I mean, another one is drugs, right? The use of drugs. Our law, the way it's written right now here in Pennsylvania, is that even the metabolites of a controlled substance are a DUI. Then you have these people that go to, for example, Amsterdam on spring break, where marijuana is legal, and try it. As long as the metabolites, they can be completely sober. They can be back in the United States 2 weeks later, and a blood test would reveal the metabolites of marijuana. This is a DUI in Pennsylvania, even though they're stone cold sober. So, I mean, there's been a lot of strange evolution of this law. Another third one that really drove me nuts was the whole thing with the quote-unquote legal limit, the BAC, right? Everybody knows it's 0.8, it's down from 1.0, which it used to be. The government publicizes 0.8. They produce charts to help people calculate how many drinks they can have and still be under 0.8. But if you're under 0.8, they can still cite you, and they commonly do cite people for DUI that don't even have, more than, they have less than the amount they're allowed to have. They're allowed to prosecute you under what's called general impairment. And that's the officer's subjective belief that you weren't safe to drive. You don't have to be over that. If you're over it, you'll get two charges, general impairment and violation of the 0.08. That's the chemical testing standard. So I guess, you've got an evolution of the DUI law, and that's discussed in that article, again, on the jmurphyfirm.com blog section. There's an article there called The Perverse Evolution of DUI Law. This is what's motivating me to really, instead of keeping my mouth shut, start making videos about how to protect yourself in a DUI pullover. So those are what I'm telling you to do. Keep your mouth shut. Don't let them bait you into talking by making you feel like you're being disrespectful or acting like they're angry or threatening you that if you refuse the tests required by the law that you're going to lose your license. That's true, but the field tests, and that could be the walk and turn, any of that stuff, or a portable breathalyzer, none of that's required. You're not required to answer questions. You're not required to do those tests. Those aren't required by the law. They're not required by the Motor Vehicle Code, and you can't get in extra trouble for failing to do them. The officer doesn't need them. You don't have to pass the test. Even if you pass the little walk and turn test, he can still give you a DUI. He can make up his own tests. So I guess don't do those tests. Don't do the breathalyzer. Don't answer questions. Don't start blabbing in the police car. When and only after they've arrested you and taken you into a facility for chemical testing, that would be usually a blood draw, then you have to do that, and that's the one I would suggest you do. If you still can't do it, fear of needles, something like that, those are reasons, but they're not excuses. If you refuse to take the required chemical testing after arrest, that's a separate offense, and you get a separate suspension. And as I said, you can be convicted of both. But those are my tips for you. And now, why? Why do you want to do this? Well, again, people are getting railroaded. I talked about the perverse evolution of DUI law, but why am I telling you to do these things as opposed to something else? These things enable us as lawyers, potentially, to make an argument about the reasonableness of escalating what's a normal traffic stop, and again, the examples I gave were a stop sign, rolling through a stop sign, into grabbing someone, taking them by force in handcuffs to a hospital and sticking needles in their arm and drawing their blood. We have to, as lawyers, if we can, break the chain of reasonableness. Of course, if the officer sees a violation of the Motor Vehicle Code, he's supposed to pull that driver over. Of course, if the officer smells alcohol, he's supposed to inquire, perhaps collect evidence about intoxication. But at what point does the officer have enough information to arrest? And if you start admitting the use of alcohol, if you start doing silly little dances in some test that you can't pass, right? No one passes that. They're just trying to get evidence to prove that it's reasonable. Or if you blow into some dirty, uncalibrated PBT, portable breathalyzer, in the field, all those, they're only collecting evidence to prove that it's reasonable to arrest you. They're not going to let you go. You have to realize that. Can you imagine how ridiculous it would be? No officer is going to let someone they believe might be intoxicated just drive away. As much as we wish that were the case, these tests no longer are actual tests in the sense that if you pass them, you're going to be let go. You're not going to be able to prove you're sober enough, especially now in a case where they're arresting people who don't even have more than the limit in their system. It's just craziness. So keep your mouth shut. Don't do the tests, don't do the blow, don't let them intimidate you, don't start blabbing in the police car, and you have to wait until after you're arrested and at the hospital or tech to do blood testing. If you do these things, we may be able to break the chain of reasonableness between the pullover and the arrest. And in that case, we may be able to get you a break or even a not guilty. I'm Joe Murphy. I'm a lawyer with J. Murphy Firm. Be careful out there. Don't drink and drive. But if you get in trouble, give me a call. My phone number is 412-521-2000.